The real problem is government pressure and regulatory overreach. If we want fair banking for all, we need less government, more competition, and simple, objective rules that keep politics out of financial decisions. Hello, welcome again to another episode in this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's really a pleasure to have you with me on this Monday. Whenever you're listening to this, be sure to go and check out the Let People Prosper show as well from last Thursday. Great discussion with Brian Riley about free trade, about tariffs, and a lot more. You don't want to miss that episode. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. We got a lot of big things that are happening, and I want to give it all to you in about 10 minutes. So let's go. In the name of quote unquote fixing the economy, this administration, the Trump administration, has had its hands deep in the market, from firing the BLS commissioner to inserting itself into corporate deals and demanding a cut of it, imposing tariffs on Americans. We got so much going on. President Trump is disrupting vital market signals. That's no place for a president, especially in what should be a free market capitalist system. Hint there, it's not. There is a place for presidential leadership, urging fiscal discipline, lowering taxes, and cutting red tape. It's encouraging to hear the president express interest in these areas, but continued actions will speak louder than words. Meanwhile, Texas' first special legislative session, called by Governor Abbott to revisit bills he vetoed, ended on Friday. How much progress was made? Well, I'm going to cover that here in this week's economy, so sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. Number one, state-involved capitalism. In the news several decades ago, few would have predicted that American capitalism would begin to resemble China's communist model. Yet, under President Trump's policies, the government is increasingly directing market activity. Recent moves include pressuring Intel's CEO to resign, requiring that 15% of the company's chip sales to China to be shared with Washington, taking a stake in U.S. Steel as a condition of its acquisition of Nippon Steel from Japan, and personally overseeing $1.5 trillion in promised investments from trade partners. These actions mark a shift towards state capitalism, where the government plays a central role in guiding private sector decisions. There's a good article out in the Wall Street Journal about this that I put in the show notes page as well. My take is that this is a dangerous game. President Trump is playing a risky game by trying to run the economy. You don't run an economy, you unleash it. When a central planner tries to steer it, things break. When individuals are free to act on their knowledge and incentives, prosperity follows. We need less government interference, more market freedom, and trust in people, not politicians and bureaucrats, to make the best decisions for themselves. What about the art of the deal? Well, from the USMCA to the US-China tariff deals and even the US-UK trade agreement, each so-called deal under President Trump has expanded government control, weakened property rights, and distorted profit and loss signals. These aren't wins for free markets. They're steps toward crony corporatism or even socialism. America needs more capitalism, not more cronyism. So how do we end this economic nationalism? Well, there's still time to change course. The presidency is a powerful platform, but it should be used to unleash markets, which are just people, not micromanagement them. What we need is fiscal sanity. We need lower taxes, less regulation, and a stable policy of trade that builds trust. Argentina's Javier Milei offers a strong example of this. In the U.S., we have the tools, we just lack the direction and leadership to use them. Related to this, I recently warned about President Trump's policy playbook on these so-called deals in the Daily Economy. Don't miss that in the show notes page as well. Number two, Texas special session in the news. Texas' first special legislative session came to a close with nothing to show for it on Friday. House Democrats walked out, and without a quorum, Governor Abbott has said he'll simply call another session. In the Senate, Republicans have proposed a measure to gut check city and county property tax bills as part of broader efforts to address the state's high property taxes, but does it really do enough? Well, my take is we should be focusing on the real priority of reducing Texans' tax burdens, in particular, property taxes. Not just shifting taxes around like homestead exemptions do, but actually lowering property tax rates. This is going to help state and local governments continue to rein in government spending as well. The primary bill for the so-called property tax relief in the governor's call is SB 9 from Senator Paul Betancourt, but it is very weak and would not cut property taxes, so should be dead on arrival even in subsequent special sessions. Well, instead, bring the voter approval rate property tax rate down to 0% for property taxes collected by all governments, by all local governments, because Texas has a prohibition on a statewide property tax. Also, it has a prohibition on income taxes and a wealth tax. So all kind of good stuff there. And Texans might start believing this will work if that 0% rate was there instead of the 2.5% rollback, which just keeps government growing at the local level in Betancourt's bill. Without that, no one else is buying it. No one else is buying this stuff. I mean, we've been doing this for nearly a decade now. It's just not working. And veering from federal policy is another thing. Another item on the special session agenda, regulating hemp-derived products. But this runs directly counter to President Trump's push to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. Why would Texas go in the opposite direction? Let responsible adults make their own choices. If a product's bad, people stop buying it. If it's good, it earns trust and people buy it. That's how markets work and how freedom thrives. The cycle of walkouts and repeated special sessions will continue until lawmakers show up and work the agenda Governor Abbott has set. Texans deserve better. Show up, get to work, lower burdens, and make the state a place where prosperity thrives. Related to this, I explore the Texas THC ban in more detail in my recent Substack newsletter post, Should Texas Ban THC or Let Markets and People Decide? Don't miss that one. Number 3. BLS jobs messenger fired. In the news, just hours after the BLS released its July jobs report showing hiring had slowed sharply over the past 3 months, President Trump fired the agency's head, Erica McIntarfer. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. The administration is now interviewing candidates for a replacement, with one of the leading contenders being E.J. Antoni. He was currently chief economist at the Heritage Foundation and a longtime critic of the BLS's data collection methods. My take is this is, what does the data show? The data shows that President Trump's economy isn't booming. And those numbers prove it. The July jobs report added just 73,000 net jobs, where 83,000 were in the private sector, and there was a decline of 10,000 in the unproductive government sector. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.2%, and once again, the previous 2 months were revised down by a hefty negative 258,000 jobs. In response, President Trump fired the commissioner of the BLS. This was a reaction, not reform. Suppose Trump keeps firing messengers and governing by heavy-handed executive order. In that case, he'll undermine the best parts of his one big beautiful bill and drag the U.S. deeper into the central planning mindset we've fought to escape. The data is messy. Don't get me wrong. The BLS has had a problem with this for years. COVID-19 and the federal shutdowns that Trump ordered in 2020 shattered seasonal patterns, disrupted labor flows, and skewed the statistical baseline BLS uses to estimate job growth. Those distortions, along with fewer businesses reporting their employment in a timely manner, according to their surveys, still affect monthly reports. But that's not necessarily BLS's fault. And revising early estimates as better data come in has always been standard practices. And in fact, the revisions have been going down over time as a percentage of employment, not up. And so the things have actually been improving overall. What's the future of BLS? Well, I first want to say congratulations to my former colleague, E.J. Antoni, on being nominated by President Trump to lead the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. I hired E.J. at the Texas Public Policy Foundation in 2021, where we collaborated on priorities such as eliminating Texas property taxes, opposing COVID-19 lockdowns, and challenging harmful federal policies like Biden's Build Back Better agenda. He has a good grasp of most economic principles, and I hope he applies that to strengthening the quality and credibility of the BLS data while avoiding politicization. This means improving seasonal adjustments, boosting survey responses through streamlined and automated collection, cutting costs where possible, and leveraging private sector data sources like ADP, Indeed, and Homebase over slower government surveys. However, I'm concerned that he has become increasingly political over time and is already facing considerable heat. I recall taking a lot of heat when the Trump administration announced that I would go there in 2019 to be at the OMB. But but for very different reasons, of course. In this case, it was being too free market is what they called me. Now, related to this is my recent piece is big government won't bring jobs back. My piece on this firing explains why. You could look at this as Trump fired the BLS jobs messenger, but big government won't bring jobs back over on my Substack newsletter that I'll put in the show notes page. Number 4 today, banking deregulation. What's going on? In the news, President Trump new executive order on guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans targets debanking, the practice of closing accounts, bank accounts, for political or reputational reasons. It's a worthy goal. No one should lose access to basic financial services because of their lawful business or beliefs. My take on this is that there are pros and cons of the EO. Trump's order addresses a real problem. Under the Obama and Biden administrations, where we had choke point 1.0 and choke point 2.0 reportedly, regulators pressured banks to drop legal customers, using quote-unquote reputational risk as a weapon. That's wrong and should end. The EO also gives Treasury and other agencies new authority to investigate past debanking cases and impose remediation. In Washington, this means increased compliance costs, additional reporting requirements, and more penalties. We've also got to consider the unforeseen cost here. Eliminating reputational risk language and reviewing past abuses is good policy, but layering on costly oversight could backfire. Banks are already burdened by regulations from the Fed, CFPB, Treasury, and more, as well as ESG and DEI mandates, which have been reduced but are not totally eliminated. This could push them to take the path of least resistance, closing accounts for anything that might draw regulatory scrutiny later, even if it's legal. A real solution here is that private banks profit by serving more customers, not fewer. The real problem is government pressure and regulatory overreach. Instead, we must repeal harmful laws like Dodd-Frank, reduce bureaucracy, and allow banks to compete. If we want fair banking for all, we need less government, more competition, and simple, objective rules that keep politics out of financial decisions. Related to this, I break down a policy in more detail in my latest commentary called Debanking's Real Culprit, Big Government, Not the Banks, over my Substack newsletter. Number 5, back to school in Texas and many places across the country. In the news, as Texas students head back to school, many are returning to new classroom regulations, including bans on cell phones in class, or really across the school, and bans on DEI programs, restrictions on library materials, and even limits on certain food ingredients, what they call junk food. This comes alongside the recent passage of a private school voucher program, which was really an education savings account set to take effect next year. I think that, this could be good, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done with that. My take is that demonstrating the need for school choice is so important. These new nanny state rules should prompt Texas parents and taxpayers to ask a hard question. What is and isn't allowed in government-run schools? Are such top-down mandates underscore the importance of universal school choice? Every parent should be free to choose the learning environment that best fits their child without being locked into a single assigned school like the government school system does today. Where does that law fall short? Well, this year's school choice bill is historic. That it really makes some things that are heading in the right direction, whereas Texas had no school choice programs before this. But it remains far too limited. Lawmakers set aside just $1 billion, which is still a lot, but it's a small percentage of the state's $350 billion budget to fund these educational savings accounts for only 1.4% of students, which is about 90,000 of the Texas 6.3 million school-age children across the state. And look, in some other states, such as Louisiana, just next door, their first year, they had 3% take-up rate instead of the 1.4% possible available here in Texas. This means that many more people, maybe 100,000 kids, could remain on the waiting list just in the first year. And in Arkansas, they've had 10% of their public school enrollment that applied for their ESA. So if it's 10%, each 1%, you're looking at, 63,000 jobs or 630,000 jobs. Or sorry, that's 10%. So 63,000 would be 1%. So if you're looking at a 10%, right? That'd be 630,000 students that could apply just in Texas, and then we can only service 90,000. This could be a major problem, and one that I think could also be a political ramification, given that this is such a limited approach. Hopefully, the goal is to increase the amount of funding that goes to the education savings accounts in Texas in subsequent years. That's what I've been told, but I will believe it when I see it, because meanwhile, what we've seen is that public education funding for this biennium increased by $9.3 billion, bringing the total to $100.3 billion that's being spent on public education across or at least all state and federal sources. So look, Texas must do better. Tree reform means universal eligibility with no income or enrollment caps, a single funding pool, not a separate ESA budget, open market access for innovative schools, and funding that follows demand, follows the child. Texas families deserve real school choice that's truly universal, and lawmakers should deliver. Related to this, check out my recent podcast with Robert Enlow of EdChoice, where we discuss the school choice revolution, what's working and what isn't. And that's on my Let People Prosper show recently. So with all that great stuff going on, well, I don't know if it's all great, but at least providing you with as much insight as possible on this. You decide what you think. But thanks for joining me in this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get a greater value with a paid subscription to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. Until next time, God bless you and let people prosper.